Hi and welcome to yet another episode. Let me just zoom on in. Here we have the Amstrad 6128 Plus, which I'd like to demonstrate to you today. This machine came out in September of 1990 for most of the European countries. There were different versions of the keyboard for the different places in Europe, so like you've got your French keyboard, your Spanish keyboard, that sort of thing. But here in the UK, of course, we had the standard QWERTY-up layout of the keyboard. In France, this machine did a lot better than it did here, mainly because it was too little too late. There was the 464 version of it, of the Plus, of course, but it had a tape deck, had a connection for an external floppy drive. This version, though, even though it's got the 3-inch disk drive like Amstrad machines like to have, from that time period at least, it had no access to a tape deck. You had to use a cartridge to be able to use BASIC, otherwise you were stuck. So you had to use the cartridge that came with it, which also had a game burning rubber on it, just to get you going in the realms of console gaming, as I suppose they were trying to push. There was the GX4000, which was a cartridge only machine, no keyboard, no disk drive, no tape deck access. You just got to use the cartridge, which in itself was definitely too little too late, because the same month here in the UK we got hold of the Mega Drive. I don't know the exact days of September, but it definitely came out in September 1990, which of course was a 16-bit machine, had 3 fire buttons, whereas this only had 2 fire buttons. So it was, as I say, far too little too late. And of course, when it came to the computer side of things, for another £150, you could get yourself an ST or an Amiga, which would have blown this out of the water. Now, it's not that this was a bad machine, it's just it was too little too late. Its main upgrades were to the original 6128 or the 464, where the sideways scrolling was now directly on chip instead of having to do some fancy programming on the original machines. There was a DMA access directly to the sound chip, but the sound chip was the same. And also you could have 4096 colours on the screen at once. Now, apart from that, it was an Amstrad 6128. So if you already had one of those machines, the cost of upgrading to it, you weren't really getting the worthwhile money. It was sort of a waste of time. So for most people, they didn't, if they upgraded, they went out and got a proper upgrade. They didn't just do a little bit of a jump. And because of that, though, this machine, even though it came out in September of 1990, it wasn't even in production for a full year. So they're quite rare machines, these, at least here in the UK, because, as I said, very few were made, and the same with the GX4000s, and same for the 464 Plus. Saying that, though, let's have a little look of what you got when you put the cartridge in that came with it, because you had to use the cartridge. I'll just give you the screen again. You had to use the cartridge to get access to BASIC, because the BASIC chips, or the chips with BASIC on rather, were not built directly into the machine. They were actually on the cartridge. And I believe this was to get around some kind of European law that was in play at the time in one of the countries. So quite cleverly, they got it through the back door, the way of getting it there, but at the same time, it made it a bit of a pain if you wanted to actually do anything with it, because it meant you had to go find the cartridge and stick it in. Granted, most people have probably just left it on their computer desk or their dining room table, depending where it was, that sort of thing. But even so, it meant if you had swapped out the cartridge, you had to stick that one back in again, just so you could use BASIC, so that you could access the floppy drive. Or if you had the tape deck version, the 464, again, you had to stick that in just so that you could load the games from tape. So I think most people probably did have that cartridge just in all the time. But if they had the extra cartridges, it became a pain to be able to swap it in and out, instead of just having the ROM with the BASIC already on. As you can see, not pressing any keys with that cartridge, it got bored waiting for me and loaded up, burning rubber anyway. So let's have a look a little bit of this game. since it's forced me into playing it. I haven't played this too much, but basically it's another pole position ripoff. There we go, push forward, get going. You can hear that the music has stopped and it's just gone to sound effects only. And this was their idea of, hey look, you're into cartridge gaming now. Whereas, as we all know, Sega Mega Drive, if you'd gone for the cartridge gaming, really, you would have got Sonic, and that would have been amazing compared to this, because of course you've got sound effects and music, the graphics are better. Granted, it was still the PAL version, so it's still not quite as fast as the NTSC version everyone talks about when it comes to playing Sonic. But that's the differences between PAL and NTSC gaming anyway, because quite frankly what they did was lazy ports. The other annoying thing with this machine though is that there's no built-in reset button. So here we go, I've got a rubbish time, I came 9th, I'd sit, I don't want to play no more. I have to actually flick the switch. There's no other way, I have to flick the switch to get out of the game and go back in again, which can't be good for flicking a switch off and on all the time every time you want to change a game. Why they skimped on putting a reset button in, I have no idea, because it is possible to put basically a reset button in the back. Different devices allow for it, expansion ports, different types of devices that you can put in the back there have a reset button. But why did they skimped? I don't know. But at the same time, if they're going to skimp on being able to load up from a tape on the 6128, well, why not skip on the reset button as well? So what I'm going to do is make it full-size camera again and wiggle this cartridge out. And as you can see, it's a third-party cartridge, a C4 CPC. When you purchase one of these, all that you get is the cartridge. You do not get the casing. I sent off to 3D printers to get it printed, because at the time I didn't have a 3D printer. So that was quite costly to get a high quality print done, but I wanted it to be a high quality one because I wanted it to fit in with the system instead of just a flimsy case. But as you can see, it's got dip switches in, and if I flick these to all on, the way they've got it set at the moment for them being all on, means I end up with a menu system where I can actually load a fair few different games that I've put across. The dip switches allow for to load different ROMs. So if I wanted to, like that basic ROM that you saw at the start there with the basic or with burning rubber, I could have it that it goes straight into the basic instead of having to press F1, but it didn't seem much point showing that right now. Well, I'll turn the machine on, and as you can see, I've got access to Plus games, and I've got access to some demos and ports that have been done for the GX4000, because basically if it's been done for the GX4000 it should work on here, because basically a GX4000 is a 6128 Plus, just with the keyboard taken away in the floppy drive. So let's go into the proper games. There's Barbarian 2. What can we have a look at that maybe shows off this machine? Let's have a look at Robocop 2, because we did have a look at the Robocop games when I was doing the Commodore 64. Oh, well, it would help if I was watching what I was doing. So jump. Whoa, that's the gap there. What am I doing? Try it again. Oh, it's one of these ones where the timing Oh dear me. Oh, I'm no good at this game, obviously. Try again. There we go. Whoa, ah. How come is it when I'm trying to show off a game I end up being rubbish at it? A bit of silence for me as I try to concentrate. What's that there? I bet that's dangerous, that spiky thing. Oh. But there we go. But as I said, now that I've got bored of this game, which I don't normally do get bored of games this quickly, but I just want to be able to show you different things. What I'll do now is load up a demo. Oh, then I'll turn the music down a little bit so I can show you other things that I've got for the Amstrad. So this is obviously a demo that was created. There's a little bit of pause in between as it changes screens in the music. Why that's happening I don't know. I don't know if I need to use a faster micro SD card, because that's what's in this cartridge, so that I can swap files backwards and forwards. Who knows, I'm not too sure. Maybe it would load better from floppy disk when I get a GoTech or something like that. Maybe I'll give that a go. But anyway, what I want to show you now though is these devices here, which I think is fine, just being quite small here. This is an expansion port for it. It needs to take power just here. Yeah, there we go, there's a power port there. But it means though that I can stick in more than one expansion device at a time. Thankfully this does have a reset button, so I tend to have that hanging out the back if I'm not doing anything else. Here we have a multi-face 2. It has a snapshot button and a reset button as well, because as you can see you could just have it straight in. These actually separate, and I could have one thing at a time, or I can use that expansion port. But to use that expansion port I need to get some special cable so that I can power everything at once, because the computer doesn't send out enough power to do more than one device, because quite frankly it was never built to do that. The snapshot button though, the whole idea is that whatever's happening in the memory, or in the memory of the computer at the time, you can press the snapshot button and save that to floppy, and then load that back in again at a later time, so that you can, say, get as far as getting to a master baddie in a game. You keep having problems doing it, you could keep, even though it would take a bit of time to reset, reload, the thing is that you wouldn't have to keep playing through a game of where you've got to start all the way from the beginning again. At least you can go from there. You would save time somewhat. I'm sure there's other things that you could probably think of for using it for, but that's, I believe, how they were pushed out. Plenty of people probably know about the multi-face 2 for the Spectrum, and on the Commodore 64 I believe it was called Snapshot 64, which basically did the same thing. This is to make the Amstrad have 512K extra. So things for some fancy operating systems seem to use that, so I purchased that while I bought the expansion device. And this device is called an M4, and what that allows you to do is to connect to Wi-Fi, so you can send files to it from your local network. It's actually got a web interface that you can use from your Mac or your PC, you know, to send things across. It can be used to going on BBSs. It can be used to load games from as well. So that comes in handy. By the way, the expansion board was called an MX4. Now that I've shown you some of these games, what I want to do is go back to the full screen and actually show you one thing that I have done to this machine all by myself. Is I've added the tape port. I know some people think sacrilege, you've cut up an original case, how dare you, blah blah blah. Well, if it was your computer, you can do what you want to do with it. I'm going to be having this computer for the rest of my life, most likely, or to the point when I've got bored with it. But it's going to be a fair few years yet before I get rid of it. There's plenty of machines out there that haven't been cut up and can go into museums and things like that. This in itself may well become an interesting thing for some, because to know that it's actually possible to add a tape deck, or to be able to connect it up to a tape deck. The reason why it was possible is because the motherboard is actually the same motherboard as what's in the 464 as in what is in the 6128 Plus. The 464 Plus and the 6128 Plus. And all that they did was remove, obviously there's a memory problem, the difference between the two, so one's got more memory obviously, but the actual controlling of the tape deck, which would normally be built into here in the 464 Plus, it had some extra capacitors and diodes and a relay switch, that sort of thing going on, so that the tape deck could be used. For whatever reason, as I said before, they didn't bother to put that port in, but on the 6128 Plus, all you've got to do is solder in those pieces and a ribbon cable sort of deal going on that goes from roughly around here, and you wire it up and then you stick where you want to put the port. It just happens to be that the space here, because obviously there's the 3-inch disk drive here, but there's some space here in the casing, as if it was there for another port to be there, but it wasn't actually put there. Some people have put them elsewhere, but to me it seemed like the most sensible place to put it there, because all you've got to do is cut out a square in the case, and it's quite neat and done and everything, and it works fine. I'm not going to show you loading it from tape today, because I want to show that at a different point, especially when I've got the correct wiring, so I can have the connections for the expansion port up and running, and maybe show off some fancy operating systems and things like that. But for now, I hope that was interesting for you to get at least a little bit of brief history on this machine and see that it can actually do some fancy colours. Because for an 8-bit machine, it wasn't a bad 8-bit machine, it's just it was too little too late, as I've said plenty of times already. But for now though, happy gaming, and whatever you do, tell your friends and family to come watch this channel.